It has been more than 100 days now since Puerto Rico declared a state of emergency over gender violence. But last week was the first time the government set aside funding to address this rise in violence against women. Deborah Upegui-Hernandez, an analyst for the Observatory for Gender Equity, is here with more on all of this. Deborah, first of all, thanks for being here. Walk us through how big of an issue this is for people on the island and how things got so bad there.
Well, thank you for the invitation and for making this issue visible nationwide. It is a very dire situation. The organizations, feminist organizations in the island have been calling attention to this issue for the last 2 years, especially after the hurricanes Irma and Maria, because the situation after crisis tends to increase in gender violence. And we saw that increase, and we saw the need to begin collecting data so that we could actually prove to the government that the increase was happening because the government was not producing numbers. You mentioned that $7 million were requested and allocated to combat this situation or to deal with this situation, because I don't like the idea of war metaphors. But we should mention that the Fiscal Oversight Board initially denied those $7 million because we are a colony, we are a territory of the United States, and this Fiscal Oversight Board actually has a say on the budget of the island. And this was one of the issues that the governor presented as an emergency and needed funds to be able to create the venues and to be able to allow the agencies to deal correctly with the issue, and the fiscal oversight denied those funds. And the only reason why they allocated them now is because the organizations went onto the streets and women went to the streets and started, protesting what happened in the situation.
So what are leaders there hoping that this new $7 million in approved funding will do to help?
Well, what we have seen since the declaration of emergency is that there was a committee named Comité PARE that has been discussing, it's an interagency committee where several organizations, nonprofit organizations that work with women and have knowledge of firsthand issues of gender violence are sitting together examining what's going on in the system. What we can see is that the system is not working. Every agency in the system needs to make changes. And a lot of those changes require additional funding because many of the reasons they are demanding and they are providing is that there isn't enough funding to hire the needed personnel, and also that there isn't enough funding to provide the adequate training. A lot of the funding also is supposed to go towards public campaigns, which in Puerto Rico, there hasn't really been many campaigns to talk about gender violence. So there's really a need to create these educational campaigns that talk about what gender violence is and what we can do to avoid that, to change the way we look at gender and the way we look at social roles of women in society so that we can prevent, not just act when it happens, but prevent what's going to this violence against women and trans people.
But the state of emergency has been declared for 100 days now. So what else does that do to help address this problem besides this now new move of providing this extra funding?
Well, it actually brings everyone to the table. It actually creates a need and an effort to actually try to make changes. And all the agencies that are sitting now at the table have not really sat together with the disposition to actually make changes in the past. And that's what we really needed. That's what this is really providing, and it's providing this context to be able to say, well, this is something that needs to be taken care of. We can't just say, oh, we're going to take care of within the next year. No, it has to be taken care of now. Like we saw, you were talking about the case of Keishla dying, or being assassinated. The same day another woman was assassinated. And that case, the case of Andrea, actually showed how bad the system is actually, how much it's failing women. Because in this case, she did everything anyone will ask a woman that is in a situation of gender violence: go to the police, go to the courts, request a protection order, try to get a conviction for this person. She did everything, and she was denied every step of the way. And this became obvious. There were recordings, audio recordings, where she was talking about how disillusioned she was on the system and how it had failed her. And we also were able to see some transcripts of what the judge actually said in her hearings. And it was just devastating to see how alone this woman was within the system. And that's the type of context and behavior that needs to be changed. And it's not easy change. It's not going to happen overnight, but we really need this gender perspective education and training, and for the system to actually develop appropriate protocols to act in these situations.
So what can people watching right now, what can viewers at home do to help?
Well, I think what people can do to help is talk about the issue in their homes, talk about the issue with their families, with their partners. I think a lot of what the movement is talking about is also the role of masculinities, the role of men in this fight. It can not only be a fight of women alone. Men need to recognize where they are and what part they play in this process, even if it's not actively. And also just to make sure that to hold accountable the institutions that they attend to, especially if they're in places of privilege, because we need to be allies to the women and to the people that are trans, that are not in a place of privilege, to actually be able to protest and demand that their rights be held upon. For example, we just had a legislation turned down. There was a legislation that where we were trying to stop and prohibit conversion therapies for people who are trans or are bi or are LGBT communities. That's something that is still in the island is being done by religious communities, but also by professionals. Mental health professionals are doing conversion therapy, where it's basically torturing young people that do not fit the standards of gender identity and want to proclaim a different gender identity. And this legislation was not passed. And what it does is it verifies the cultural beliefs that LGBT communities are doing something that is not right. And that is the type of belief that prejudices people and allows this gender violence to replicate. So those are the type of things that people can help pass those type of legislations that prohibit intolerant behaviors, that prohibit racism, that prohibits being prejudiced against communities, LGBTQI plus communities.
All right, Observatory for Gender Equity Analyst Deborah Upegui Hernandez, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.